how many of you believe you're on some form of a digital journey yourselves? Good, so we hope to have some interaction. We'll probably learn as much from each other as you will from us. And Raj is way too humble. He knows a lot more about digital than I'll ever know. But did what Matt said, did that scare you? Did it inspire you? Did it overwhelm you? Just give some reaction. It seems simple. There's a lot to it. Those of you all on the journey, has it been really simple so far?
I found it insightful. I could understand.
Yeah. So you found some things that you have that resonate with you and your experience and what Matt described. Yeah, our hope is to share that with you as well, that to take Matt's points and try to bring them to life in a real example that we're experiencing on the journey ourselves, and then have an interaction in that regard. To start, when Matt says, basically what is your objective? So Erie Insurance is over 90 years old. I've been with the company about 3. But a long time ago, the founder knew that the human touch was the key. So he knew a long time ago that experience mattered. So our intent is not to replace the human touch with technology, but to enhance it. So you probably need to start with your headset somewhere in that direction. I think there's a lot of fear in the industry that we're going to lose the human touch as a result of technology. Our intent is to focus it on enhancing that. The other thing we want to do is kind of walk you through how you would orient and think about the digital journey and how that might change the way you work. And we want to share with you the implications that we've seen on the journey. One is an orientation of how you think. Matt's touched on that. We'll give you some examples. Another is an orientation change on the way you go about your work. We've also done some implications to organizational structure, how we put the work together, and how we think about architecture. So it's been a pretty broad, top-to-bottom, people process implication on how we think. If we go to the next slide, the one additional component that Matt would have in his 9, if we covered all 9, is we believe to compete and win, it's that connecting people and experience, but being able to do that increasingly in improved fashion, faster and faster. So how do you combine a very fast time to market with a very good experience? Because there won't be a single killer experience that lasts for any period of time. And so we've got to set ourselves up for success both in terms of experience as well as speed. So we'll try to bring both of those points to life for you. So the next chart, if you look at the far right corner, those in the back may not be able to read this, but this is the change in the orientation of your thinking. Matt mentioned outside in. So the way we articulate that at Erie is we're in business for something different than you may expect. It's to work with agents, customers, and employees in the way that they want to engage and interact with us best. Now, that's a completely different orientation probably for most insurance carriers and a very outside-in orientation. So that's the beginning of a digital experience. Then what we do is we go up to the left-hand corner, and the order of this matters. Now, when you look at those concentric circles, you'll see functionality to the right. How many of us in the past have started with, can you go get me a mobile application? Can you go get me 10 pounds of innovation for 5 pounds of money? Kind of functionality conversation. That sound pretty familiar? Can you get me on the web? Can you get me remotely mobile app created? Where we want to start and always have the conversation is what really is the objective? What is the intent? And the objective may look a little different in some of what we'll share with you than you've thought about in the past. And then how do we really understand the experience? So we'll talk to you about how we go about in our approach to understanding the experience of the customer, the agent, and the employee. And then to Matt's point, translate that to the process so we understand where the process may need to be replaced or updated and modified in some capability. Then we go to talk about technology, but only then. Now that's the journey we're on. And with that, Raj, I'll let you turn it over to
Thanks,
the next
Ruben.
Conversation.
Ruben, the program that you have put up in this slide looks to be pretty large, going all the way from objective to experience to process and capability, functionality. I think probably Ben, having been working with the rest of the team in reimagining digital, he'll be able to throw more light into this with maybe practical examples you can take and then go through.
Sure. So I think the change in thinking comes out very obvious anytime it should be a red flag. Somebody says, I need to get some data from somebody and put it into this process for this process to function. You called it the information flow problem. That's essentially the thought. And no kidding, the objective as we looked at our first notice of loss process originally had a form sort of like this. I mean, we protected the innocent a little bit here, but it was essentially, here's a form, I got to get this data in order for the new claims process to work. Not remembering that there are human beings engaged in a very critical experience. So red flag, if I am thinking I need to collect data and put it in the process, but again, think about that orientation. It's on some operational process that maybe is costly, takes me too long, I have too much of a head count. I'm really focused inward at that point about cost and the management of that and efficiency and those kinds of management terms rather than thinking about an experience. So if you go to the next thing, what we're really talking about is somebody was in an accident. And what the heck do I do now? I have had potentially a traumatic experience. I need help, right? And I need you to make me feel, not just become whole, but feel like I'm protected and feel good about the situation I'm in, even though I may have just lost the one big investment I've made in the longest time, maybe, well, until there's driverless cars and we're using Uber. That was the thing that, and I made this investment and I'd like to know that it's going to be taken care of, and God forbid somebody is injured. What do I do, right? So our objective turned more into a personal and caring and satisfying experience. So the product, the thing we wanted to deliver, was a strong experience. And so as we looked at that, if you can go to the next.
Maybe Ben, before you go on, how many of you have seen an objective like that where you work?
You go back.
Versus reduce cycle time, put money on the bottom line, put money on the top line. Are many of your objectives written from a feeling perspective versus a financial accounting perspective? That's a pretty simple but pretty transformational perspective change.
Yes.
Do we really care about how people feel?
And for that, here's the thing too. So, and sometimes we get that as you look at it. Okay, so you guys are selling touchy-feely stuff. Great. Well, there's real numbers that show that when a customer has a positive experience, their satisfaction goes up, and higher satisfaction leads to some measurable results like retention, right? Increased sales. The things that matter from a business growth perspective are directly correlated to when a customer has a positive experience. I mean, it goes from there. So if your target is to create that experience, it's kind of like I coach basketball, so I always like the John Wooden's quote of, you work on the other things and winning is a byproduct of that. So you win in the market as a byproduct of focusing on the experience. So as we looked at this, I mean, the kinds of things you see in a journey all the way end to end. So back to not just that one piece of the pie, which is a submission of a claim, right? So give me the loss date, your policy number, so on and so forth. It's more about what happens before the loss, right? Bless you. How am I making sure I'm in a better position in case something was to happen? What happens before I even submit? Is this the right thing for me to do to submit this claim? What's the impact to me, right? Am I going to get the result that I expect going into that of just being whole again? Maybe there's some other implications. Crap, my rate just went up, right? I'm spending more on my monthly budget than I expected. Those are things that are important in a consult phase. So as we thought about this, we really kind of started thinking about stuff like empathy, which is critical to our business, back to the human touch. Putting yourself in the shoes of the person who's experiencing a loss, providing empathy, right? And making them feel like they are cared about, which that can be inaccurate, or feel cold if it's not authentic, which is very important to be authentic about that. Don't be disgenuine. And then consult them on the situation. So if we go a little bit deeper, so I'll kind of end on this. This is an eye chart on purpose, but basically think about end to end and where are you focusing in the process to create capability. So if we think about from the event and everything that happens leading up to the event, all the way through the statusing and becoming whole again, right? And the constituents and their interactions. So whether or not I'm a customer, I'm an agent, or I'm an employee involved in this experience, what is my role? Not just, I need to collect this data as an employee so I can run this operational process. I'm part of a larger process that the customer is experiencing. And so understanding that and then focusing in on those stars are there to kind of show you can start to think of where would capability enable an experience, right? So again, the product is the experience. The capabilities are the things that we would deliver to enable that experience that we've designed.
Ben, I don't know if I've got you right, but in a way it sounds to me that we spent last 20 years taking as much human touch out of the process as possible. Now we're looking at how do we bring it back so that things become more bonding, I should say, something that people can empathize with.
Yeah, so to our earlier point, if you don't look at the world this way, you probably will use technology to replace the human touch. So if you'd back up one slide, let me make Ben, how many of y'all been a project manager or been involved in projects? Ever had a problem with scope? I don't know what you're talking about, Ruben. That was somebody else's problem. It wasn't mine. I never had that problem. So when we started our claims replacement program, we started with the business process. But typically a technology start would be submit first notice of loss, which is the form that Ben showed you. And the scope of the project would be submit first notice of loss. The scope of the project would not be, let's start the very beginning when somebody's had a significant accident or significant life event and talk about what that looks like and what that connection looks like, what that feeling looks like, what the data transfer in an empathetic way looks like from the very beginning. Now, does the claims department get involved in that conversation? Probably not, so we'll talk about what are the organizational implications. So what I wanted to call out here is if you don't start at the left with the objective and then go to the experience, you're going to have the wrong scope project and you're never going to have a chance to enable the experience. You'll be confined to what you can do with the technology in that subset.
That's a great answer. Ruben, I don't know, I have a question later on for you. I had written it down, but I think since you've talked about this topic, it may be actually a good point to ask you that. As somebody who has worked in the IT industry, program management requires us to understand the requirements very well. And for the past 15, 20 years since we've been doing it, our understanding of requirements has been easy because it's all about a policy process, a claims process, this digital and touchy thing. It's, I think, requires a little more the creativeness in understanding the process. So probably, I know that you have a slide later on when you're talking about the team organization. You can touch upon that a little bit. Because how do you get teams to really understand the requirements in this perspective?
Right.
In this perspective, if you want to say anything about it now, a few minutes you can say, and then
Larissa knows my answer. She was at the ITA Pro conference earlier in the year. But I've been in IT a long time. When I started in IT, it was all about mechanizing existing processes. In other words, take things and do them in volume, back office kind of things. And then we started to automate the front office. Now what we're doing is creating the experience. Those are different sets of requirements. And as Matt talks about, you'll need your core processing, you'll need your data, but you also need the experience. So you need to understand that you need requirements for all those. Now, if you don't start with, these are actually journey maps that we do to understand how people feel in their interaction with us. If you don't start with a journey map, you're going to miss those requirements. It's not possible to see them, right? You're going to start taking, basically an F&OL is a triage of a claims process to determine which adjustment process you're going to use, right? So you're way down in the process weeds and the technology, you'll not get the right requirements. So you have to start in our chart, objective, experience, process, technology. Then we can talk about what that means to the team.
great.
Just one quick point. If you think about the power, and really, again, none of this is new. This doesn't have to do with the digital revolution or anything else, just a lot of changes happening. But the power of everybody on the team understanding the purpose of what they're doing. So we talked about process. When people understand the purpose of that process, they understand the intent, know why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's a completely different result. You get a much more powerful, positive, high-value result when everybody understands the purpose.
Thank you, Ben. Ruben, I know this is one of the slides that you had put up. I think what we talked about from a process, getting the experiences to happen. You talked about a few minutes back about speed and experience as the two key paradigms that you want to look at. I know this is one of the slides you use internally at Erie to get your teams to understand what you mean by those goals. Would you want to throw some light on that?
Sure. And actually, as just a part of transparency, last year we took our entire IT team department through a conversation very similar to this, recorded it. The folks, our partners in India, reviewed it as well. We had our sales and marketing business partners participate with us so we could all get a sense of how would we shift in our thinking. So what we've done is we've gone through those. If you don't like circles, this is the block diagram. The same thing. So it's all, what matters what your orientation. I'm symmetrical. I kind of like blocks. My wife likes the circles. So, however your orientation is, maybe it resonates. But what we tried to do for you is go through those first 3 blocks, and then we get down to these next 3 that really have organizational implications. They have architectural implications. They have implications on how you structure your work, how you scope your work, and how you go after reuse. Now, one of the things that you may not have seen in Matt's charts on innovation, he talks about a bimodal tech organization, right? Now, there can be lots of implementations and interpretations of what we mean by bimodal. But what we're trying to do with the presentation layer is actually separate that from the core systems. So to Matt's point, we need our core systems to be able to add coverage, add state, change product quickly, but we don't want that to interfere with how we present. Now, we'll talk about in a moment what more the organization looks like, but one of the things we've done at Erie is we've begun to centralize the creation of presentation. In other words, the implementation of experience. So is it easier to have multiple teams create a consistent, empathetic experience, or one team? And so what we've done is we've created more of an end-to-end orientation versus I'm a subject matter expert of claims processing or policy processing or billing processing, because that's not what we're doing in the presentation. What we're doing in the presentation is bringing that experience to life. And so you don't really need in the presentation, actually it might be an inhibitor, to be an expert in policy processing, claim processing, and billing processing, because you will confuse that with what an experience looks like. And so we have basically separated for focus and to have an end-to-end across company orientation, the presentation group, as well as to find reusable components that the entire enterprise can reuse, and she was going to talk about that in just a moment. Then we're organizing teams around, I'm the policy processing, I'm the billing processing, I'm the claim processing team, and I am an expert in that, and I do want to create through good architecture the ability to very quickly change those systems to support what is needed in the presentation space. Now, one last point I'll make here is that's not easy to manage, right? Because now these teams have to work together, right? In the past, I'd like to be autonomous. I'm going to do policy from presentation through processing, through data, through infrastructure to the best of my ability. And I don't want anybody to interact with me in any other way because it might slow me down. Now we have to have a big team collaborate in a very different manner, that one presentation team is going to create an end-to-end presentation of everything you do in your business, working with other teams that are basically your back office and data processing entities. Now that creates a leadership challenge and a management challenge. Your alternative, though, is to have what? Siloed implementations of policy experience, different and connected from claim experience, different and connected from billing, and where does that all show up? With the policyholder and the potential prospect.
That's an important mind shift, because the second process you described of somebody being excellent at policy administration. That's great, but none of your customers are buying excellence in policy administration, right? So that's a classic inside-out view as opposed to an outside-in view. It's spending a lot of time becoming really excellent at something that nobody wants to buy, right? It's totally ancillary to what you're actually delivering.
How many of you have deployed even a current policy administration function to independent agents? What was their reaction?
They loved it.
They liked it?
Yeah, they did. They loved it.
Another reaction?
They have too many of them in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so that's kind of our experience. There's just too many pieces to keep together. Could you guys please find a way to sew this together for us so we don't have to?
They end up selling the one that's easiest for them to deal with instead of sometimes the one that's valuable.
Absolutely. So that's experience, right? So do we do what we know is right, or do we do what feels good? We probably all know some things aren't good for us. I drink more alcohol than I should, but I know it's not good for me. But I enjoy it. So that's just how human beings operate, right? That's just who we are. So yeah, we're going to go to what's simple and easy. Now, if your policy system though is more of a processing system, and your agents want to be high touch and sales oriented, they're going to feel that that's actually an encumbrance to who they are and what they want to be. And certainly they weren't designed for end consumers to interact with, because they were designed for back office experts who process policies, bills, and claims. We could, Raj just said, with partnering with some of these folks and others, we actually created in that gateway an architecture to completely control the experience and not have the policy, billing, and claim systems dictate the flow in the experience. So that's a critical architectural implication to get to the experience that you want to create, not one that's dictated by another system's workflow.
Going there.
So to understand this right, the ones that you highlighted are things that you guys are delivered or on the verge of delivering, and the rest of the stuff are phase 2s or phase 3s of the whole.
Absolutely.
So most of those are sequenced over time, but to Matt's point, you start with the experience outside in, but then on the technology side, you kind of got to start on the inside and go out. If my core systems don't support what I'm attempting to do, these front ends aren't going to make any sense to anybody.
Yes.
So that's where the architects need to come in from the bottom up, understanding the end game that you desire.
Great. Ruben, I thought it would be interesting to hear, because I think AJ. Sorry, Ruben had a few other things in the slide. The customer and agent were part of the slide. Ruben has spent some time, and I heard him talk about how he gets the teams to work together. So I thought it would be interesting for Ruben to share the thought, how we get the teams to work together.
You know, what I'll try to do is kind of compare and contrast before and after the left-hand side of the chart and the right-hand side of the chart. The fundamental point here, I read an author that defined leadership as the skill set or the need to create change, get people to move from one place to another, and management is actually the skill set of managing complexity. This is a sum of both. But if you don't have the leadership and the organizational change management wherewithal to do what we're describing, it's going to be a significant challenge for you. So if I compare and contrast where we were organizationally as a company and where we are transforming to, on the left, are any of you in silos? Do any of you feel like the work kind of moves from Ben to Shiva to Ruben to we don't know where it went, right? And it's very difficult to understand who did what last and who really was accountable for any kind of solution. So you get, on the left-hand side, you have an interesting sequence that is not an accelerator. Every time we hand something off to somebody and wait for them to deal with it, that's going to slow you down if you can find out where it ended up in your organization. It's an interesting accountability model. Things kind of flow downhill where I've lived most of my life, right? And so there's not a fair shared accountability. So if you look at the right-hand side, you actually do have represented here the circles that you see: business, partner, IT. And we'll talk about that more in just a moment. The piece I left off this slide, mea culpa, is the customer and the agent. And so what we do now on the right-hand side versus the left is we engage all of those in our delivery. The customers, the agents, IT, business, and the partner from the beginning. The objective, the experience, the process, the technology, end to end, we all participate. And where we are maturing and leveraging our independent agents is to involve them in our strategy and in our direction and get regular and often feedback in what they do. One of the things you might consider, how many of you can keep up with all the technology? We all said we couldn't. So have you ever thought about using your independent agents as innovation think tanks? Or do you feel like you're not harnessing the power of that, you're constraining them? Please don't download that on your machine, and please don't connect that to my technology, because you're really going to screw it up. But what if, on the other hand, we had some incubators that said, hey, I'd like 20 of you to go find everything you can out there to create a better experience between all of us. And if you find something that works, 80% of them will fail. But as a carrier, we can take the 20% and invest in scaling that for the entire enterprise. So just a different orientation on how the whole team operates. As it relates to partners, you can no longer think of some of the folks around you that you work with as contractors or vendors. You won't be successful. You need to think of them as strategic partners, because that's how you're going to get connected to all this technology. And by the way, no offense to any of these distinguished gentlemen, no one of them can figure it out on their own either. So we're going to have a very interesting set of partnerships in our future. You know, are you going to be in the experience business, or are you just going to be in the underwriting business? Are you going to then have to partner with somebody else who's in the experience business as these folks are investing in the front end, or you want to be in both businesses? And how might you partner with somebody to help you be successful? And so you've got to move to a completely different orientation on how you treat people. The last thing I'd bring up is you really need to organize your work a little differently. So you need to understand how all these experiences are going to impact your entire corporation. And we were actually working to group our work from a corporate perspective, sequence it from a corporate perspective versus a silo. And so we actually have organizational entities within Erie that help to see where we might have disconnects in terms of what we want to do to create that experience as well as advance our product, state expansion, and our processing efficiencies. And so that's just another management dimension that's in your future that the team is going to have to work from a corporate perspective as well as their individual capabilities.
Great. Ruben, the couple more slides from your deck. I don't know if you want to cover that. We have only 24 minutes. Should we?
Let me just hit the key points at the end.
Yes.
If we go to the next one.
Yes.
So what we try to do is summarize, there's a couple of charts, Matt's key points, probably our outside in, and then when you have this experience, it's an outside in and an end-to-end orientation. So how do you think about that in your company? How do you bring that to life? Otherwise, the experience will not be what you want for the end constituent. The order that you think matters. Outside in, objective, experience, process, technology, architecture. You're going to have to reinvent yourself. It is what it is. I don't think there's any alternative to that. Speed, reuse has to be a reality for you. It can't be a concept or a philosophy. And we're actually at the Erie working in a way to make that what we do every day for every project. The partnerships we talked about, the team structure we referenced, and I also talked briefly about how you organize your work, how you manage the work, and how the corporation looks at the work all in. So this is a full team, full contact sport kind of activity.